The carriage?
What's your daughter doing?
Good. I just picked her up at the airport.
She's back home?
She just, my father's funeral's tomorrow, so she flew home for that.
Where is the funeral?
In Rochester. Yep. Yeah, so
So she flew home, then she'll be flying.
she'll be home flying back Sunday.
Okay.
Yep. Yeah, she's doing well.
Okay, good. She's enjoying it.
On the agenda?
Yep.
We get the full crew tonight.
It's been a while, hasn't it?
Yeah, that's it. Projector, and then where's? Oh. See, yours, mine looks different than yours. Just.
It's nice to be.
That's it. We're good? Okay. All right, we're going to start tonight's presentation. Well, first, there are no public comment speakers, so we're going to move into recognition. Tonight, we are fortunate enough to have the partnership plan with us. So if you want to come on up, and I'll turn it over to Superintendent Dr. Mike Funk.
Rick and Sarah, come on up. You guys, go ahead.
Hi. Yeah, welcome. Thanks for coming.
So, thanks for being here tonight. One of the things that I've trying to emphasize with folks throughout the district is, I think during the last couple years, a lot of districts in Minnesota really kind of shut the doors and, kept people out to keep people safe. And I think that as a result of that, some community connections started to be lost. And so I've suggested to Allison that, to move away from that, we start inviting some community partners in and recognizing them for the partnership that they've had with us over the years. And what better group to do that than the partnership plan? Mm-hmm. So tonight, we would like to just thank you and recognize you for what you have done. And for those of you who don't know, I'll read a little bit of history here. So the partnership plan grew out of a task force that occurred back in 1982. And that task force's recommendations were that a coalition be formed to seek additional sources of income to broaden the experiential learning opportunities for community youth. So in 1989, the partnership plan was formed. Since that time, the partnership plan has raised and dispersed over $6 million and improved the educational lives of thousands of St. Croix Valley students. It funds academic enrichment by giving grants to support specific programs that are evaluated and approved by the Partnership Plan Board of Directors. The Partnership Plan serves District 834 and its students exclusively. So Rick Robbins is here as our Executive Director of the Partnership Plan here tonight, and Sarah Martin is here as well as the Office Manager. So on behalf of the school district, Rick and Sarah, I'd like to present this certificate of appreciation to you for your continued investment in our students and staff and commitment to supporting innovative learning experiences. Thank you. You bet. Thank you.
I will correct one thing. Sarah is now our Program and Communications Manager.
Oh.
I changed her title as of July 1, so I want to make that correction. No, thank you. And we appreciate being, I guess, the initial partner to be recognized. There are many others in this fine community, as we all know, and I'm sure those will come in future board meetings. So, no, just thank you. I've been at the helm for a little over 3 years now. Bev was my predecessor prior to that, and there's been several other executive directors throughout the years. I just want to remind everybody our annual fall online fundraiser is coming up in a few weeks, October 12th and 13th. You'll be hearing lots about that in the coming days. And we will also have a booth next Friday over at the homecoming the carnival before the football game. So thank you all for your support. Thank the community for their support. I truly enjoy what I'm doing. It's great to connect businesses and organizations throughout the community and raise money and be able to give money back to our school district and our students. And it's hard, as I tell people, it's hard for anyone to say no to education, at least over and over and over. Eventually, they say yes to something. So. Sarah?
No, I guess I would just say that it's an honor to work with you all, and it's an honor to serve the district. We love what we do. We love raising money and put it right back in our school districts and making our classrooms brighter and stronger and providing those educational opportunities. So thanks for letting us be the first one and for letting us do the work.
Great. Are there any comments or questions for the partnership plan? I just want to say thank you. I mean, I know that not only do you give to our students, but you give endlessly to our staff as well in the form of, sponsoring just anything that they want to do, any kind of great idea that they can do, and giving students in the community the chance to recognize their favorite teachers, their teachers who have made an impact. I mean, those are all such special things that I know my son remembers and participated in. So just lots of great memories from everything that you do, and so many initiatives that literally have been supported by you. I mean, I think of Pathways. I think now you're focusing on mental health. I mean, the way that you partner with us is just amazing and valuable. So thank you.
Thank you.
Anyone else? Director Kelvenberg?
I like that as an organization, you're not top heavy with lots of administration and whatnot. So when you're out there and you're raising money and it's going toward the partnership plan, it is going back to the community, it's going to the students. And I'll just highlight that every time I get the chance, so I appreciate that, and thank you.
Great. All right. Well, thanks for being our first ones to come in tonight. I'm
Thank
sure
you.
we're looking forward to everyone, but you certainly are near and dear to our hearts. So thank you, Partnership Plan.
Okay, thank you.
Yes, thank you. All right. With that, we're going to call this meeting to order. Joan, can you do the roll call, please?
Director Hockert?
Here.
Sorry. This is there we go. Director Kelsenberg?
Here.
Director Petrie?
Here.
Director Porbenny?
Yeah.
Director Riley?
Here.
Director Fatava?
Here.
Chair Sherman?
Here.
You have a quorum.
Great. Let's stand for the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Well, another special point of this evening. Oh, wait, no, we're going to approve the agenda first. Is there a motion to approve tonight's agenda? Okay, Director Petrie in a second. Director Porbenny, all those in favor of approving tonight's agenda, raise your hand and say aye. Aye. Opposed? Motion passes. Okay, now we're going to get into the recognition and welcoming of our two student school board representatives. So we have a little swearing in that we're going to do. But really quick, just before that, I want to give them a chance, each of them, just to maybe introduce themselves to all of us and to the community just a little bit, and then we'll kind of do our little informal swearing in. So let's start with Ileana.
Hi, I'm Ileana Baylock. I'm a senior this year. This will be my second year on student council. I'm also a part of BISA, which is a club at the high school, and National Honor Society, and Stillwater Lacrosse. And I'm really excited to be a student advocate this year.
Great.
My name's Kira Jelenik. I'm also a senior. This is going to be my third year on the council. I'm also a part of lacrosse, and I'm also just excited to have a voice and just experience something new.
Great. Thank you guys so much. All right. Should we do this sitting or okay.
How are we going to do it?
All right. Why don't you guys raise your hand so we're all official, I guess? I don't know. We've never done this before. Okay. So I affirm that I will support the Constitution of the United States
I affirm that I will support the Constitution of the United States
and of this state,
and of this state,
and that I will discharge faithfully
and I will discharge faithfully
the duties as a student representative
the duties as a student representative
for the School Board of Independent School District 834,
for the School Board of Independent School District number 834,
to the best of my judgment and ability.
to the best of my judgment and ability.
Thank you. Welcome to the board. We're so excited to have you. And just for the community to know, they are full members of the board, just without voting rights. So when you have something to add to the conversation, raise your hand, and you'll just get called on like anyone else. So we look forward to your perspective.
Thank you.
Yeah. Okay. With that, we're going to turn it over back to you for your report.
Okay, so for the academic report, so far the school year's been off to a great start. Seniors are doing well, and the attendance policy seems to be doing overall okay, and but it has brought on a little bit of frustration, specifically with the detentions that are required with it. There's been a big focus on social events this year and participating in new school events. And there is still a persistent ask to get office hours back. Today was our first activities fair, and it gave an opportunity for freshmen and all grades to join clubs and teams. And overall, the entire high school is looking forward to homecoming and all its events.
Great. Thank you.
Here's our sports report. The boys soccer team is currently ranked number 1, and they have an 11-0 record heading into tonight's game with Forest Lake. The girls soccer team is also playing Forest Lake tonight for a conference game against the Rangers. Both teams needed overtime on Tuesday to defeat the Bears from White Bear Lake. The girls swim and dive team continues to add to the record, setting dual meet unbeaten streak with wins over East Ridge and Park. They will be hosting Roseville tonight. The football team is off to a 3-0 start with a win over Roseville last Friday, and they are traveling to Osseo tomorrow. The boys and girls cross country teams are both off to a good start this fall. The boys are ranked in the top 5 and travel to La Crosse for an invite on Saturday. The girls team has won 2 invites so far this season. Girls tennis is off to a good start this season. They come off wins over White Bear Lake and Park. They have their hands full with number 4 ranked Mounds View today. The volleyball team opened their conference season with a win over Woodbury to improve their 4-1 record this season. They play Mounds View tonight and travel to Apple Valley for an invite this weekend. We hosted our activities fair on Thursday today, and it was a chance to introduce all opportunities to SHS students. Next week is the start of homecoming. We will paint the town red on Sunday, September 25th, crown senior royalty on the 26th, Powder Puff football is on the 28th, our bags tournament will be on the 29th, and homecoming carnival and football game on the 30th. And then to close things out, we will have our dance on Saturday the 1st. Add to all of that, the games will be hosted throughout the week and Pony Pride on display.
Great. Thank you. Does anyone have any questions for either student? Okay. Thank you so much and welcome again.
Thank you.
Thank you.
All right. Our next report is for Dr. Funk, Superintendent Funk.
First thing I would like to do is introduce the board to Dawn Lewick, our new teacher, our director of schools. Thank you. Yeah. So Dawn has just come up tonight because she knows we're going to be talking a lot of data, and she's still on track to start October 3rd. So thanks for coming up early to
We appreciate it.
participate and listen in this meeting. I want to echo what the students said as far as the smooth start to school. I think I've talked to a lot of people in the district, and they said, wow, this is like pre-COVID, the start this year. So that has been really, really good. We've had minimal transportation issues with the transition to the new company. So I think that has helped, again, with a good start to the year. I continue to meet with various groups throughout the community as I learn more about Stillwater. There's a group I met with. They actually spoke at the school board meeting here, I think in early August. Be smart about keeping your guns safe at home and secure so that little kids can't get to them or harm. So that was a very good meeting. I've also met with a group called Solar for Stillwater, who this happened actually before I left my previous district. We were able to get a grant to put solar panels on a couple of our buildings. So the folks from Solar for Stillwater met with me probably about a month ago now, and so I've asked Mark Drummerhausen. We have solar on our early childhood building, and I'm looking to see what our savings were there. Sounds like with the grant, it is, they basically they pay for the installation. So we just get the savings from the solar. So more to come on that as we get more information. Let's see what else here. I have a superintendent advisory group that I'm starting with Carissa's help. That will be October 12th, and we are getting trying to get a wide swath of people throughout the community on that. So if you're watching this live or if you watch the recording, please contact Carissa in the district office if you want to be part of that group. Speaking of meeting with community members, I will be doing a Zoom with a number of PTOs on Monday evening on September 26th to get some, feedback from those folks as well. We're going to be doing something kind of unique and different this year as far as communication. We are going to start doing podcasts in the school district, and I think I'm the first volunteer. I think I've been voluntold maybe by Carissa that I will be doing this. So, but again, it's just a different way to get information out to the community, and we will be starting in that probably in the next month or so. So that is my report for this evening.
Great, thank you very much. Any questions? Great. All right, for my board chair report, just a thank you to the board for completing all the surveys from the MSBA, and then at the our next study session, we'll have the results of that, and we'll kind of talk through that with MSBA, and Dr. Funk will be a part of that, so thank you. That's all I have. All right, we're going to move to the consent agenda. I think you put that on there. And just for the community, we're switching over to a new platform, so everything maybe is just taking a little bit longer, but I can read it too, Joan, if it's not. Should I go ahead and read it, John? Okay. All right. For tonight, I'll go ahead and read it again. It's A, school board regular meeting minutes. B is payment of invoices, September 10th through September 23rd, 2022. Item C is technology purchases, staff laptops, and classroom displays. Item D is Rutherford Elementary rooftop unit replacement. And item E is the Human Resources Personnel Report. I will go ahead and make a motion to approve consent. Can I get a second?
I'll second.
Okay, Director Hocker, thank you. Any comments or questions? Seeing none. All those in favor of approving tonight's consent agenda, items A through E, raise your hand and say aye. Aye. Opposed? Motion passes unanimously. Thank you, everyone. All right, we're going to move on to our first action item of the evening, and that is to adopt preliminary proposed property tax levy 2022 payable in 2023. And tonight we get to see in person Julie Sink. So welcome. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Chair Sherman, board members, Dr. Funk. Tonight we're going to talk a little bit about the preliminary levy. This is something that you do every year in September. This is just a preliminary certification, and the final one will be in December. There is a law that says we have to complete this by the end of September, and so that's what we're doing here tonight. If we look at the purpose of this is simply to provide an overview of the proposed property tax levy and any significant tax levy changes. And I will say that we have seen a large growth in our referendum market value and our net tax capacity in the district. It's an increase in referendum market value of 20%, so that's a very large increase, and 15% in our net tax capacity. So those two things do impact the levy certification as we move forward. Some pieces of this include, this is due to the county auditor and MDE, again, no later than September 30th. We continue to make revisions, and even today, we saw revisions in our levy certification, and so at the end of the meeting, or end of this presentation, we'll ask the board to approve the maximum levy so that there's still adjustments to be made. And then in December, if there's anything that you don't want or you want to change, you still have that opportunity at that point.
Chair Sherman, I'd like to make a
Yes.
comment here. So, for a number of years now, MDE seems to be getting slower, or they keep on making revisions. And so it's happening to us right now, and it's happening to districts all over the state this week who are certifying their levies. And we have gone so far in my previous district, and this is just something for us to consider when we're setting the calendar for next year, to move our September meeting to the last week of September to give an extra week for MDE to get their act together, because we are going to be asking you to certify the levy tonight with a moving target of numbers, which we shouldn't have to do, but that is as a result of MDE continuing to update the information that they have. And so I think it's, in the future, it's safest just to move it, this September meeting to that last week.
Would make sense.
And again, you can see the timeline, and so if this meeting was next week, you would still have a day to certify that levy, and so it is easier, and then it's consistent as we move forward into the actual December levy. If you move to the general, and this is difficult, so I hope you have this on your computer to see this. We show last year's, each area, the referendum market value, those pieces that pertain to referendum market value, which is all your property minus your ag land and your seasonal properties. And so those pieces of the referendum those pieces of the levy that are pertain to that show at the very top, and then the remaining ones, they show on the right side of net tax capacity. So it depends on the calculation. As many of you know, the only way that districts can levy is through legislation or voter approved. Those are the two biggest pieces. So if the voters approve, which they did in the past for our operating referendum and our tech levy, you'll see those on there. Otherwise, they're mainly due to calculations set by the legislature. It's different than counties and cities where they can decide what that is. We cannot. So you can see all of those. You can see the total down here of the total general. Last year, it was 37 million, a little over 37 million. This year, it's 38,777, and so it's going up a little over 3% is that increase. What does that mean to our taxpayers? Because of that net tax capacity and our referendum market value going up so much, it's actually a decrease in their taxes. Unless they see a big valuation change in their homes, you'll see most people their taxes, school taxes will decrease. So that's really what that means.
Have a handout.
I do. I can actually show you a handout of what that looks like if you would like to see.
Yes.
It's similar to what you've seen when you go to pass an increase. So it looks like a little bit what you maybe have seen from Ehlers in the past for like a homestead. A $400,000 home is about $1,500 currently. Next year, it will be $1,361. So it kind of shows you there is quite a decrease. Even though the district's levy is going up, it means it gets spread across more properties and more values.
Great.
Does that make sense?
No, that makes perfect sense.
Our community service levy on the next page, it is pretty stable from the previous year, and the debt service levy is a little bit higher, and that's mainly due to increases in just that payment schedule for our debt service. But overall, the district's total levy is up right around 3.9%, somewhere in that range at this point. But again, we're asking the board to certify the maximum to allow for those adjustments at the state level.
I would like to make a motion to certify it to the maximum. Can I get a second? Dr. Porbeni, any discussions or questions? Director Riley?
I am not interested in certifying it to the maximum. I am still not on board with the new Q-Comp levy that this board has placed on the taxpayers as a non-voter approved levy. And I also think that we kind of go above and beyond for long-term facilities maintenance funding. And what is the breakdown for that? I know there are times where we have to do an adjustment on that. What was that for last year for the spend on long-term facilities maintenance?
What was the total levy for last year's long-term facility maintenance?
Versus, yeah, and the adjustment that we're allowed to take versus what we levied for? You know how they make the adjustment?
The state makes an adjustment based on what we spend and what we don't spend.
Mm-hmm.
Last year, the adjustment for long-term facility maintenance was a little over $2 million. This year, it's slightly over $1 million. So it just depends on what isn't spent. Now, I will say that it was very difficult in these last couple of years to spend that health and safety, those long-term facility maintenance dollars because of COVID. It was difficult to find materials, and it was difficult to have people come in and do the work during those times. And so that's why you're probably seeing those bigger adjustments at this point. You probably won't see that in the future simply because we are able to now do that work.
Yeah, I think this is kind of common practice for this district, and I know as of these last couple of years, they've been utilizing long-term facilities maintenance funding to do things off of the community design team, so kind of above and beyond just to repair and replace. And so I am not interested in hitting the max on that and taxing our community above and beyond.
Thank you. Director Hawker?
Quick question. If we were to entertain not going to the max, like how does that work in the budget process for the rest of the year? And since this is just the preliminary, setting that budget for the year, or actually for next year, sorry about that, how would that impact our final decision? Because we don't make a final decision until December, correct?
If you wouldn't levy the max, that really hinders MDE to make any adjustments in your levy. So if there's prior year adjustments, they may have to not do them, so positive or negative, or they're going to affect your current year levy so that they can make those adjustments for prior year. If, depending on what the maximum is and what you decide to do, that could affect your state aid as well. So however that may work. So if you can't levy the maximum, say, in operating capital, and then that also affects the aid that you would receive in operating capital. So it is, at this point, you can always change your levy in December. You can do that at any point. Right now, it's easiest for the district to do the maximum because that allows for those adjustments. You can always change it in December. All this does is allows the county to spread that across and give some preliminary numbers for people in the community for their tax statements.
Can I ask a question? I know it's a moving target, but could something like this be posted on the website for people to kind of see? Because we do get questions from time to time. Is that something you would ever do or consider doing? I've never received anything. This is really helpful.
I would do this probably after we get the final number at the end of September.
Okay, yes, that's what I meant.
That.
Yes, when it's not a moving target anymore.
Not a moving target.
Okay.
I would consider doing
I
that.
think that would be helpful because I think it, to me, it's good news that people's taxes are going down and that we can spread it over, more units of housing. So, Director Petrie?
So I will be voting for this. I think that it's important for us to have the flexibility in terms of that levy option. And I just wanted to clarify, so does this include the results of the 2 levies that we passed last fall?
Yes, it
Okay.
does.
And so even though we passed an increase in both in our operating levy and enacted a new levy for technology, which I think every parent in the district is delighted by because, I mean, I think that some of our systems need upgrading. So even though all that happened, most taxpayers are going to see a decrease simply because we have had so much growth. Housing growth in this district has led to this situation where the taxes, individual taxes have gone down because we've had so much growth. Is that correct?
That is correct. Unless your individual property value goes up significantly, that would be the only reason you would see an increase. But if it's similar or stays somewhat the same or grows a little bit, you'll still see a decrease in your school taxes.
Correct.
Right. Thank you.
So I'm going to go to Director Vodova, and then if no one else wants to speak, then we'll go to Director Riley.
So it looks like from here, your estimated change right now is 10%. We're going to pay 10% less in taxes. And that's with the maximum levy that we have, just to give ourselves flexibility, but not like as a final number.
Correct.
I guess wanted to keep in mind that people, we have all these new houses being built, I don't know how many units, 1,200 units, some crazy amount, but people should keep in mind that a lot of our schools are very full, and that also means there's going to be more students, which means we're going to have to have more schools. We can't just, right now it's going down, but I just think people should be aware that it's great, it spreads things out, but it also means we're going to have to take care of these students that are going to be coming with these new built houses. So that's all I have to say. And I will be voting for the full amount.
Great. Director Riley?
I can appreciate the flexibility, and I completely understand that. There is not history at all in this board of ever going back and redefining or lessening those dollar amounts. And I am very well aware that there are many in this community that are super disappointed that when they received their tax statements after the levy was passed, it wasn't the $12 they were told it was going to be as an increase. It was much more than that. And I just want the community to know that this is the first stage. And then from here, you gather your thoughts and put your words together, and then there's a hearing for you to say what your piece is and what your thoughts are. And then the board should reflect on that, and the final vote is in, what is it, November?
Early December.
December. And then the truth and taxation is in November?
It's actually before the final vote. It's early December.
Right before it,
Yep.
same day. Okay.
Great.
Thanks.
Yes, Director Kelzman.
Yeah, I'm willing to be corrected if I'm wrong here, but I believe that I've heard that almost every district in the state certifies to the max. And so I often ask, how do we compare to other districts? And we will not be different from other districts by certifying to the max.
The majority do.
Great. I also will be supporting this. I just want to say, just to educate voters, because the board did approve QComp last year, but I just want to remind voters what we approved last year. This is actually going to be the first school year that those dollars are in action for our students. So everything is kind of delayed a year, and so I think sometimes what I oppose is kind of that start-stop on programming, where we never get any traction to see what does work. And so I will be supporting this, and I'm thrilled that taxpayers will see a little bit less, given the provisions that you've already talked about. And I just want to, again, thank the community for passing both the capital projects technology levy and renewing the operating levy. We can't do what we do without support from our community, so that's invaluable. So with that, I'd like to call the vote. So all those in favor of certifying to the maximum, raise your hand and say aye.
Aye.
Opposed?
Nay.
Motion passes. Thank you, Julie. Thank you. All right, our next report is Student Achievement Update. And for that, we have Dr. Caleb Drexler Booth. Hi, Caleb.
Thank you, Chair Sherman, Directors of the Board, Superintendent Funk. It's my pleasure to be here tonight to share with you Student Achievement Update, the data from last spring. So we have a lot of data to look at. I'd love to say we're going to break records for shortest meeting, but it's not going to happen tonight.
You put them on the clock a couple days ago, and it didn't work out very well.
So I think we have close to 60 slides, something like that. So I would ask if you have questions as we're going through data, make sure to ask those while we're looking at the data. We'll have time at the end as well, but it could be that we forget the question or whatever the case may be as we're trying to navigate through all of the data. So the purpose of tonight's presentation really will be looking at the data alone, just because there's the sheer volume of it. We will come back in October and share a little bit deeper analysis and really the direction, strategic professional development that we're going to be engaged with, the strategies that teachers are using, the goals that buildings are setting, those kinds of pieces. Perfect. So I can speak to a little bit of that, but really that focus will be later. Tonight really is how are we doing? So with that said, let's dig in. The first thing I want to cover is why do we assess our students? It sounds obvious, right? We have to. Obviously, it's a learning organization. But I think when we step back and really look at the why, there's a lot of reasons. And a lot of reasons why we have each of the different data points that we do. So the first and foremost is we want to know our students. We want to know who they are, where their skills are at, how we can best support them. We also want to be able to use our data to align student learning experiences. So we match students with courses or intervention programs or acceleration based on their scores and based on how they're performing. Both from quantitative data from MCAs and other hard numbers, as well as some of the qualitative components. Tonight we're focused on the numbers. We also want to grow our teachers, right? We use this data to set school improvement goals. Individual teachers set their own growth goals as part of QComp and part of their evaluation process. It's directly tied to hard data. We also use the data for our evaluation of programming to improve our programs, to make adjustments and tweak in curriculum, to track initiatives and how those are going. We also communicate our performance, individual student performance with parents, group performance, performance as a district in situations like this to the board, but also with parents and with community in other ways. So as we dig in, as I said earlier, there's lots of data to look at. We're really going to be focused on the shaded portions up here, ACT and advanced placement on a national level, FastBridge, an internal assessment, the Minnesota Comprehensive Assessments or MCAs, as well as the NWA. Other data points that we do use include the access test for our EL English learning students. We use the COGAT to identify students for GATE programming, gifted and talented education. And we also participate in pre-CT and PSAT as well at the high school level. So a quick overview, a preview, some data spoilers. We're going to see a slight bounce back from 2021. So if you remember last year, we saw a pretty significant decrease. This year, we're going to see a slight bounce back. We'll still see some continued performance below pre-pandemic levels. We will see some significant growth within cohort groups of students, as well as grade levels. We'll continue to see our students outperform state averages. But really what we're going to see is, a bounce back, but we're also going to see, what could be called a slow roller coaster, right? Where you go up one year, you go down one year, up one year, down one year. And what that really shows is a need for continued and sustained systems work. And so we'll talk more about that as well in October. So the first thing to highlight is our student demographics. So we shared this with you last year. We've had in a couple areas we've seen some more significant growth. The first one I would point to would be our Hispanic or Latino group of students. We saw about a 38 increase in students that amounted to about a 0.5% increase on the total population. Similarly, our I was going to highlight another one, but we actually went down in two or more students of two or more races from 5.3% to 4.3%. So these numbers do fluctuate. It's important to look at some of the trends. I think the Hispanic or Latino population also translates to the next slide that we're going to look at. One thing to highlight is we do have 50 or so languages other than English spoken at home as well. So on the next slide, we'll look at some special populations. And it's important to note this data comes directly from the Minnesota report card at the MDE website. And it references data that we share with the state on October 1 of the previous year. And so we'll see our English learner population growing quite a bit. So last year, there were 232 students identified. And this year, it's 278 or 3.4%, up from 2.8%. Similarly, our students with an IEP served with special education, the total count went up as well. Previously, it was 1321 or 15.9%, and this year it's at 17.1%. So again, we see some fluctuation and growth within our various student groups. So the first data that we're going to take a look at would be from the MCA in reading. Just a quick review. The MCA, also known as the Minnesota Comprehensive Assessment, is an assessment required by the state of Minnesota that is used to assess student mastery of Minnesota academic standards. We give the assessment in reading, math, and science at different grade levels. Reading is grades 3 through 8 and 10th grade. Math, 3 through 8 in 11th grade, and then science is given at 5th grade, 8th grade, and when students finish their high school biology course. So that could be anywhere in the high school career. These data represent a broad snapshot of student learning, a point in time. They're designed really for school and district accountability. We do use the data for some student identification and supports, but the primary purpose is district and school accountability, which we'll get to in a little bit. I want to say with the Minnesota Comprehensive Assessment data, all of the data that we're sharing tonight can be findable on the Minnesota report card. There's a lot of different ways to disaggregate data and to filter data. So sometimes people will say, I ran the same report and I got a little different number, and it might be because of the filters that are used. And the one to kind of pay attention to is that included students. You can be looking at all the students who are tested. You could be looking at all the students who qualify for the accountability measures. So they have to be enrolled by, I think, on December 15th. They have to be enrolled for half the year. So there's different ways to sort that data to get results, depending on what you're looking for. For the most part, we're looking at all tested student data. So, as I mentioned, we're going to see the decline into 2011 or 2021, and then a slight bounce back. I think last year when we shared this data, we just shared a one data point. I think we just shared 2021. And part of that was because the state had said, be very cautious in how you're looking at this data. We don't fully understand the impact that COVID had on our learning environments and the impact that it would have on scores. So don't compare back to previous years. And I think it's important now that we do look with a broader view at historical data. We can see the impact that COVID may have had, and we can start to see where we're starting to grow from that. One thing, if we can go back a slide, I would just want to point out, and you can't see it very well, but this slide, this one. This slide is about our participation rates, not performance. You'll see a similar trend both in participation and in performance. The performance or the participation is pretty key. You'll see last year in 21, there were 77.3% of students participating in the MSA. Previously that was 97.4%, so a 20% drop in participation. For 2022, that did rise back up to 94.4%, but there's still a number of parents and students opting out of the tests. There is a real impact to parents and students opting out, which we'll talk about on a future slide. So here we see the actual growth. So we see that drop, we see that decline, we see a slight bounce back up. We'll dig into the actual numbers and how they play out at grade level on this next slide. So you can see here on this table, we've got each grade is represented on a row, but you can also track cohort growth by the color coding. And so within this data, you can see a number of our grade levels improved from the previous year. So for instance, fourth grade, if we look at this year, 58.4% of students were proficient on the MCA reading. Last year, fourth grade was 49.9%. So the grade level saw growth with a different group of students. We can also, as I said, look at cohort. So if we look at fifth grade, we see that last year's fifth graders, 66.6% of them were proficient on the MCA. That's an increase as a grade level from 63.3 and a cohort from 49.9%. So in 2021, that group of students, less than 50% were proficient. Now in 22, 2/3 of them were proficient. So we're able to look at growth both from a grade level and a cohort perspective. And I'm not going to read through every single data point, if that's okay. It's in front of you. You can look at it. If you have questions, let me know. Yeah.
I have a question. So I noticed the cohorts that went up are like the fourth graders this on 2022 and the fifth graders 2022. And the rest of them kind of didn't go up very much. So I'm wondering, did we focus our interventions on those grades? Because we spent a lot of money on the interventions like the Huntington Learning, right? And I'm just wondering, were those focused on the former third graders and former fourth graders? Is that why? I mean, is there any correlation between who we focused our intervention on and the results between 21 and 22?
I'd have to dig into the data to answer that question with any sort of confidence. I do know within our Huntington program, we did focus on second and third grade, but with our title, Read Well, or the ADSIS funding, the Read With Me program, and our general funded interventionists, they did serve students in K through 5. And all of our teachers are engaged in providing tier 2 interventions to all students as well. So I'd have to dig deeper.
We can check on that.
It just seems like it would be worthwhile to check on, to see what.
We can look into that.
We also look at our achievement by student groups. So here we see our race-based student groups. And it's important to note that the students who are included here have a cell size, a group size, large enough to be reported. So if, for instance, if we had gone back to the demographic tab, you'd see that our For instance, our Native American indigenous population, I think is right at 20. And then that's the size limit that we can report on. So when you look at each grade level, it's too small to be reported often. And so in terms of this data, this is only those students who have student groups that have a cell size large enough to be reported. Again, all of this is findable on the Minnesota report card. So for instance, again, here we see that every group surpassed their grade level, or their, not grade level, their like group across Minnesota. So they surpassed statewide averages, and a number of groups grew from the previous year as well. We also look at the same data for our special populations. So English learners, free reduced price lunch, or free reduced price meal students, and students with disabilities or served with special education. So again, we see improvement over 2021. We do see a slight drop against the state of Minnesota for our English learners, but increase at the others. I will say it's important to note, if we look at our English learners, our EL population, we do see growth over pre-pandemic level, but it's still below the state average, and I would say more importantly, it's at a level that we want to see consistent and sustained growth in. Moving on to MCA Math, again, we'll see the same. It's almost like it's the same slide. This is participation. So we see the same drop in participation with another bounce back up. I will say, even with this bounce back up, we still had 370 students not participate in the MCA. And what that means on a future slide is, again, going back to the report card, there's different tabs. And one of the tabs is the North Star Accountability, which we'll speak to. With North Star Accountability, any student who does not participate on the MCA, who does not have a medical exemption, is considered not proficient for district and school accountability purposes. So when we see, for instance, at the high school that there were 235 students in 11th grade who did not participate on the MCA, that number for the North Star Accountability Report is going to plummet because every single one is considered does not meet.
Chair Sherman?
Oh, Director Vodova, yes.
So when you say they're considered does not meet, do they put in a score for them of 0? Do they put in a score of 50? Do they put in a, what score do they add to our numbers? A 0.
A 0.
So we can use those zeros to see what the tested students are.
Good.
We could have a better
Yes.
understanding.
Yep. And again, we're able to view the data from different perspectives. So in the slides that I'm going to show, it doesn't include those students as zeros. I'm only including the tested students with valid, with scores. Otherwise, the data gets skewed very easily.
Yes. Dr. Funk?
Question for the students. He just mentioned 200-plus kids opting out of the test at the high school. Is that something is there much talk about that? Is it something that's becoming more common? Any feedback on that at all?
I think it's coming more common just because, it's seen as more optional nowadays, and lots of students will kind of use it as, a free day, because I don't think a lot of people understand, the actual, impact of not testing. I think they just think that, opting out means, one less person taking it.
Yeah, I just don't think that they understand really what it means when they decide that they're not going to take it. They just just don't want to take another test that they're not being graded on.
So we can do a better job of
Communicate.
helping educate our families and students. The other thing, I think, and you'll probably allude to this later, if you want to go to one of the state universities, you can, even for college and the schools, you can use your MCA scores instead of having to take the plan or the ACT. So that's another incentive for kids to do it.
And it's free.
And actually,
Yeah, I didn't know.
and actually one step farther, it's coming, I believe. I'm not sure if it's next year or the year after. I'll have to look in the superintendent memo, but it was from a while ago. Minnesota State colleges and universities will be able to use the MCA score for course placement. So there is a requirement for students who come in to take remedial courses if they don't prove proficiency on an ACT, AccuPlace, or whatever those are. MCA will count for those. So for students who may not take an ACT because it's test optional, this would be one way to demonstrate proficiency so that they don't have to take non-credit bearing developmental courses.
I find that to be, I think that there is a gap on what families and students understand. I mean, even you two now just hearing that, does that make you see it different?
Yeah.
I mean, I think that if we communicate more and share the upside to taking it, that might help those participation rates. Yeah, go ahead.
I remember like the only reason I knew that like not taking it affected like our schools was because of a friend who had like a parent who like worked in the district.
Okay.
Other than that, like no one else I had spoken to like knew about like the effects of not taking the MCA.
Great, that's really good feedback. Thank you. Thank you very much. Director Riley?
Are these newer changes that the colleges and universities are implementing since COVID, or has this always been the way it is?
I don't know if it's dated.
I can tell you from personal experience with my oldest daughter, she was able to utilize the MCA instead of the AccuPlacer for college, for at least the college and the schools component of it.
How old's your oldest daughter? How many years?
23.
Okay.
So 5-6 years.
Thanks.
Director Kelsenberg?
Director Riley said it, but I'm not sure if anybody heard it, but the MCA is free. There's no cost for it, and the other tests are free. But if you take the MCA and the ACT, can you choose whatever one serves you better when you go to a college application?
We'll get back to you on that.
All right, so the math, back to the data, right? So math MCA trend, we'll see this, like I said, the same slide into 21, the same little bounce back. What's interesting with math, we see almost our slide mirrors the state from 18 to 19 to 19 to 21, and then we do have a slight bounce back up, bigger than the states. Reading trend was a little bit steeper of a drop. So again, we'll take a look at the data from grade level as well as cohort. Again, you see, I tried to do a little coding to help me and you read the data. So any number that's bold showed greater growth from the previous year at that grade level. Anything that is italicized showed improvement from the previous year for the cohort, and anything that's underlined shows a data point greater than at least one of the pre-pandemic assessment periods. So for instance, if we look at our 8th grade math scores at 60.4%, that cohort, the grade level showed growth over 8th grade of the previous year. That cohort showed growth both from last year as well as the pre-pandemic year of 2019. So just a quick coding to help understand how some of this data might function. Again, cohort by race. Yeah.
Sorry, could you go back one slide? It seems like, was there a change in the math program in like 5th grade in 2019? Like, was there some change in a curriculum then?
No.
No? Okay. There's like a 20% drop between 2018 and 2019 for the same cohort. It was pretty significant, I mean.
You know, it would be interesting to look at, and I know that you guys are pulling this data and it's relatively new, and so you've got a lot of further digging to do, but it is interesting to look at like what factors could relate, because I know we did have some like budget cuts, and I know I've asked like, what was the impact of those budget cuts? Things like that could be at play here too, in addition to some other.
It gives you things just to look at.
Right.
Yeah. Sorry.
No, that's okay. Thank you. So with our race-based examination of math proficiency, all but 2 beat their scores from the previous year. The 2 that did not were our, again, 2 or more races identified. Oh, that's the only one. And they're all over their state peers in Minnesota. And again, with our special populations, we see all of them outperforming their peers at the state. We did see a slight drop in our free reduced price lunch scores, 0.2%. And then we get into science. And this slide, I unfortunately, as I was reviewing my notes for today, and I was going back to the state website, I'm seeing a glitch on the state reporting. Because when you look at the actual numbers of tested students and scores, I'm seeing a different percent count. So it looks like on this chart that we've got 62.5% of our students participating in the MCA. In terms of, again, one of the slides, one of the filters on the report card shows that only 58 high school students participated in the MCA. When you flip it to a different way of looking at the data, 299 out of 523 were proficient. So I have no confidence in this slide, unfortunately. But I can say I did dig into the data, and so the numbers of tested students on the future slides and the percentiles, those are correct.
Okay.
So again, we saw a decline with a slight bounce back. Feel like I'm repeating myself. And then we see the same kinds of trends within our student group. So kind of mixed results compared to 21, but again, all of them are still over their statewide peers. And EL and free reduced price meals and students with disabilities, same kind of story. All of them improved from 2022. All of them perform over the statewide peers. I do want to highlight some good news here. If you remember last year, one of the pieces that we looked at, I think both in this report and when we got to our World's Best Workforce report, looking at race-based achievement gaps, we keyed into our English learners last year, where there were 0.0% of students proficient. This year, we have a significant increase at it's still not where we need it to be. We need to continue to see growth, but to have that kind of growth from the previous year and historically is important to identify and to celebrate. We do have more students as well in this tested year. So I think the cell size almost doubled with the number of students. So now we get into how MCA data is used for school and district accountability, and that is the North Star accountability process and report. I know we've shared some of this previously, so I'll try to go through it a little bit quickly, but I want to highlight how schools and districts are identified for support. There's a 4-stage process of looking at data. The first stage, all schools, regardless of their status as being a Title I school or not, go through this process. So the first step is to look at the academic achievement, including the test refusals and the absences and the students who started but didn't finish, everyone except those who have a medical exemption. So the state identifies what the lowest 25th percentile of Title I schools is. They set that as the cut point. So that's just to identify what's the number that schools need to surpass. Any school that falls below that line in math or reading moves on to the next stage in the process. The next stage, stage 2 then, is academic progress, where they look to see the students who had a score last year to the score this year. So, and they assign a point value. So if a student had a partially meet standards and they move to meet standards, they get points awarded to them. There's a calculation that determines what's the average number of points a student earns. Again, they take the cut point of the bottom 25th percentile of Title I schools. Anyone within that range from stage 1 who's in stage 2, they drop into stage 3. It's also important to note if the cell size is too small, then they bypass stage 2 completely and move right into stage 3. I'll talk about that more in a little bit. Stage 3 looks at consistent attendance. So they identify, again, a cut point, this time the lowest 5% of Title I schools. And consistent attendance is identified as students who miss less than 10 days of school in a year. 10 days or more is considered chronic absenteeism, and that's what triggers this. So there's a cut point, a percent of students who are not chronically absent that we need to hit. If not, then we go into that fourth stage, which is maintenance of enrollment. Again, here they take the students who were enrolled in the school last year or district and the students who are enrolled this year, and they do a mathematical calculation, identify where they fall. And if you, next slide. So if a single subgroup of students from the other ones that we're looking at goes through each stage of that process, then that school is identified for targeted support. And there's, state does a calculation every 3 or 4 years with a 3-year average, and they also do an every year analysis. And so you can fall into targeted support through a couple different ways. If a school is identified, for instance, in 2018 as targeted support, and they are identified again in 2022, then they move from targeted support to comprehensive support. Comprehensive support is also identified for secondary schools with low graduation rates automatically. There's not a tiered process. Yeah.
This part really won't affect us a whole lot because on the previous charts, we were ahead of state average on just about every category, right?
As a district.
But not as a subgroup.
So,
I'm sorry.
So when you roll all the data together from all of the schools and all of the grade levels, then yes, we were ahead of the state averages. When you break it apart into individual schools and grade levels, then the picture can look very different.
Right.
So when we're looking at a whole grade level, or a whole state, a whole district, we may have at a grade level, a couple hundred students in those groups. In these groups, it may be as low as, between 20 and 30 students, and that can really impact how that group moves through the stages.
Can I just ask on attendance, is that excused, is that 10, how is that defined, I guess, as an absence? Is that for any reason? So whether you're called out or is it for unexcused?
It's 10 absences or more.
Excused or unexcused?
I don't believe in the calculation,
It doesn't
you know.
differentiate.
Right, because I had a sick child who had both flus and norovirus, and I was sent a letter of warning as a parent.
So it is, okay.
Yes.
So they don't, because I was going to say, I wonder how many absences with COVID and quarantining and in and out, we probably had quite a bit, so, okay.
I had an elementary school student with Lyme's disease, and I got a truancy hearing notice. I had to get the doctor to write a note, because you can't go to school for 24 hours if your kid has a fever over 100. So my kid would spike 103-degree fever, and then he couldn't go to school, and then, it was like.
Good to know. Well, because
And it's not
absences would probably be significant in the last few years.
Yes, yep.
Okay.
And it's not consecutive 10 days, it's 10 days
Total.
throughout the year.
Right.
Yeah.
Correct.
It's ever.
Yep. So moving on, we had 3 schools that were identified as support, needing support within the North Star framework. Anderson Elementary, we talked about, it's a single subgroup. In this case, it was the free reduced price meals that went through all 4 stages. St. Croix Valley ALC, their graduation rate was at 56.8%, 0.81%. Any school, any secondary school below is 67% is identified as part of that average. And then because 30% of the ALC students come from the high school also receives a linked support status.
Just a comment from a legislative, the 4-year, I think if you were to take a look across the state of Minnesota, you will see almost every ALC in the state on that list. And so it's a federal requirement that we have to have the 67% threshold. But part of the reason students go to an ALC is for an alternative education, and a much more realistic target would be a 5 or 7 year graduation rate. So what happens is your ALC gets identified, and if you live in a community like we do, where most of the students from our high school are the ones who go to our ALC, then the high school gets identified. So this is something when we're talking at either the state or the federal level, that is a completely unrealistic scenario for ALCs. For the 4-year graduation, right?
Right. I would imagine that's a lot of schools, yeah.
I'd like to kind
Yes,
of
go ahead.
counter that a little bit.
Yep.
Because I've had 6 kids, and my experience with the high school has not been real great meeting the needs of kids that don't fit the mold. And there's so many kids that fall through the cracks.
Mm-hmm.
And I believe that many of those kids end up at the ALC that don't necessarily
Okay.
belong there. So I think there's things we can do and look at within the high school to do better for our high school kids. I really do.
Well, I agree with that 100%. I'm just saying from my experience with a lot of kids who at the ALC.
I get that.
Yeah.
But I think there's things that happen to these kids along the way when their needs aren't met and they don't learn
Sure.
accountability and other measures prior to getting to that point. I think things need to be done earlier on than waiting until they get pushed off to the ALC.
Okay.
So it's just my perspective.
Yes, Director Petrie?
So I'm wondering what, and maybe this is on the next slide, but I'm wondering what happens with the targeted support. Is there special funding from the state for this, or does this come out of our general budget to address these issues? How is that addressed?
Yeah, so there's no additional funding generated through this. So it would be using our existing funding to be able to support the building. There are some Minnesota regional centers of excellence that offer support. We've gotten a couple emails saying, hey, we're here. Here's a webinar. You can learn more about how to access some of that. So we're learning a little bit more about those components. But in terms of financial resources, there's no additional dollars generated.
I find this slide to be very helpful because it definitely, I think when you find out or when you hear that you're in a district with identified schools, you just automatically kind of panic, right? But I think this actually puts some really good context around where these cohorts are that need our help, obviously, and need the extra support, but it kind of puts it all in context. So this is very helpful. Yes.
And piggybacking off of that, I'm noticing with Anderson, were staff at Anderson aware, like was this kind of coming out of nowhere for them, or was this something that staff were kind of anticipating? I don't know if you have an answer to that.
I think it came out of nowhere.
Okay.
I have a question, is this from 2021 or 2000? Yeah, this is during the.
You want to answer
These, so the data here, in 2022, the state redid their calculations as they do every 4 years. So they did it in 2018, and then they did it again in 2022. In order to do that, they looked at, so these numbers, the reading percent, they looked at to create a 3-year average, they took 2019 and counted 2019 twice, and then 2022 data as one. So they did not include 2020, didn't happen in 2020, and they did not include 2021 data specifically because of the impacts of COVID. So 2019 weighted twice, and then this last year of data.
Director Riley?
Just kind of looking at this right now with the Anderson Elementary, and what, is there an increase in free and reduced students at Anderson from the prior segment of identification? So that we had closures, and then there was a shifting of boundaries and students, and I'm just curious if the free and reduced numbers went up at Anderson from that time. If you don't know that right now,
I'd have
that's-
to, have
but
to look.
that's something to look at.
Okay.
But it
Go back
does,
to like 18, or how far back?
About 18,
Okay.
19, 17, 18.
but it did say, am I reading this right? And to kind of piggyback off what Director Riley's saying, the group is too small to report. So does that mean,
So for, again, stage 2, it's kids who have a previous score and a score this year.
okay, so it's not the total population, it's,
Exactly.
Okay.
And so in this case specifically, it could only count kids who in 3rd grade had a score, and then in 22 had a score.
and that's what made it too small?
Right.
Okay, got it.
Is it part of the consideration, wasn't Anderson where we had our online learning cohort? Is that true? I
Yep.
can't remember. There was one school that had all the online learning kids. And so do they count as part of Anderson, or is that a separate?
I believe for the MCA data, those students were back at their,
I was
their
just
home
wondering.
schools for the data.
One last question for me is, did our families reach out? Were they curious about these? Did they get any notification or communication, or?
They did, and I met with the Anderson principal today. She did not receive one phone call.
Oh, okay. Thank you. But also thank you for sharing the communication with them and being proactive. That's helpful.
So we're about 20% done. There's 5 assessments. We took care of the big one, right? So MCA is huge. The rest we will go through a little bit more quickly, but we do have 4 more assessments to look at. So, like I said, we're not going to break any time records. So FastBridge data, you're familiar with FastBridge. We use it for our universal screening and benchmarking of students. We offer it 3 times during the year, in September, January, and again in the spring. We use it to measure growth between those periods for students, and it is normed to national percentiles. So we have an external measure of our growth, not just classroom-based assessments. Teachers use it, again, for that goal-setting purpose within QComp or school improvement planning. And it offers a much more detailed analysis of skill development, especially with our K-1 students. Certainly a deeper analysis than what the MCA offers. And as I said, we are able to assess students in K2 as kindergarten, 1st grade, and 2nd grade as well. MCA is only 3rd through 5th at the elementary level. We also use FastBridge for identification for academic placement into interventions, as well as for gifted services. FastBridge is also directly linked to some of our intervention tools. Press is a reading intervention out of the University of Minnesota that we've been using for a number of years. And teachers are able to look at the report of a kid and identify exactly what intervention they need to be able to use with that student. And so it's a tool that will be very, very valuable as we grow in our use of interventions.
So do we use FastBridge, because I know it's taken twice a year. Do you really look at that to say this is kind of where they come in to the school year and then where they are exiting in the school year? So we can kind of see that growth.
Yep, exactly. And so, in fact, right now, the testing window for FastBridge just ended today.
Okay.
And so our teaching and learning team will be looking at that data, bringing all the interventionists together on Monday to really look at it, parse it out, and then go through the protocol that we want buildings to use to identify students into the Tier 3 interventions, but then also what can classroom teachers do either in whole group or as part of their Tier 2 win time to be able to support students. So that's one thing that I'll talk more about it later, but that's a significant focus for teaching and learning to support schools with this data mining and data, understanding the data and what to do with it. So we also use FastBridge to do our progress monitoring. So teachers every other week are able to run different probes that all align, and so we're able to really track students in a positive way. So, a lot of slides that are going to look alike, just like we saw with the MCA. So you're going to see this. This is where you'll see that slow roller coaster a little bit more because we've got 5 years of data here. If you're able to see the bottom of that screen, just to help read it. So for instance, the first column says 2017 SP. So that is the school year 2017 to 2018, and it's a spring data point. So all of this is spring to spring, with the exception of the middle column, which is the 2019 to 2020 school year. We're using the winter data point because we did not have a spring data point. So to help contextualize growth across the years, we did use that winter data point. So again, here you'll see at kindergarten some celebration, right? 63% of our students reached their grade level expected scores. You'll notice that is the highest score in the last 6 years. And we'll see that again in a couple other slides as well. Grade 1, you see kind of consistent performance from before the pandemic. So again, we see that drop into 21 and then a slight, or in this case, a nice bump, a 12-point increase. Grades 2 and 3, this is the A reading. The previous was early reading. I can get into the details later if you like, but they're different assessments looking at the different aspects of reading at the different grade levels. Second grade, we see a slight dip and then some improvement back into the 70%. And at third grade, again, we see kind of a slight dip and then maintenance. Fourth and fifth grade, again, same kind of data trends here. Dip into 21 with a bounce back into 22. Still room for growth as we look at previous years. The next slide looks at cohort growth. So similar to what we did with the MCA, we're able to look to see how a group of students progresses through our system. Quite harder to see on the other slides. So again, you see that kindergarten class who's outperforming all the previous kindergarten classes. We see some nice growth at grade of our last year's first grade students. Similarly, last year's second grade students and third grade students, we saw some nice consistent gains, especially that third grade cohort. Fourth grade, we saw some nice gains, and now it kind of plateaued, a slight dip into this year from last year. And then at fifth grade, we see this sharp increase and then that roller coaster. All right, looking at math. Math, there's quite a bit more variability, interestingly, between the graphs. The reading was a little bit smoother, and this one is quite variable. So again, that kindergarten class outperformed the preceding grade level or the preceding kindergarten classes. Great news there. Again, first grade kind of bounced down and then back up to roughly where that grade level had been performing in previous years. Second and third, same kind of pattern that we saw with reading, a slight dip, kind of leveling off. And then at third grade, this bouncing. high variability. Fourth grade, also highest in the last 6 years. So I think they were at 80% of students meeting that grade level. So some good highlight there. And at fifth grade, some variability, again, bouncing from year to year. Again, cohort growth, we see where those data points were at. Some pretty significant growth, and this would be something that we'd want to take a deeper look at. We see some sharp growth at the early grades, and then it kind of fluctuates, right? We see some consistent growth, but then at that fifth grade, we have a spike, and then it levels off again. So we could certainly dig into these data a little bit differently to understand what might be some of the various root causes and pieces that were going on in the system at the cohort, as well as curricular or whatever.
I was going to ask, because would you be using this to identify curriculum gaps? I mean, that might exist in those grades that.
We certainly could. I think the the early reading and the early math, because there's different assessments built into it, you're able to parse that data much differently. The A reading provides, you're able to dig in a little bit in terms of skill, but not quite the same way. And so we would need to look at more data than just the Fast Bridge to do that. NWA MAP, Measures of Academic Progress. Similar to the FastBridge, we use this for universal benchmarking. We use it for growth between periods that's normed to our national percentiles for that external measurement. Teachers use it for goal setting. We use it for placement into different programs as well. So those two functions separately. FastBridge we use at K-5, NWA MAP we use with the GATE program, 4th and 5th grade, as well as the middle schools. Here we're taking a look at the average percentile of students in reading. And so you can see for this last year, 6th grade, kind of maintained where they were at the previous year. Again, we're able to see it by color. And so both cohort and the grade level kind of performed as they did the previous year. And again, this is average percentile across the nation. And 8th grade, we see it as a grade level. We're seeing some drops at the grade level. At 7th grade, interestingly, we'll see another slide with math that shows a different story, but we're seeing that kind of roller coaster. Little up, little down. So as we look at math then, same kind of slide, same organization. That 7th grade cohort, significant improvement as a grade level, exceeding pre-pandemic levels, and as a cohort, significant improvement from 6th grade. So this would be something that we would want to dig deeper into to see, is this something about the students in the cohort? Is it how they bounced back from COVID differently? Is it teaching strategies, whatnot? So I don't have that information now, but that's something that the schools and math departments will be engaged in terms of how do we continue this growth? How do we continue growing? Onto the ACT. We're somewhat familiar with ACT, reading, English, science, math, and writing. At a national level, used for college placement, to look at college and career readiness. Kids are able to take these assessments multiple times if they choose to. This has been paid for by the state in years past. Districts have paid sometimes. We have not paid for students to take the ACT in the last number of years. That plays out in our participation rates. So we've seen a pretty significant decline in students taking the ACT, both because it was not free for them and because a lot of colleges went to ACT optional. But we do see, and it's important to highlight growth and success when we see it, we do see growth in our ACT scores from last year. kind of back to some pre-pandemic levels, as well as consistently above the state averages. And this is on the composite score.
Do we offer a program for the free and reduced lunch to have their ACT paid for?
We're going to be having some conversations about that in the future.
Because, I mean, it seems like otherwise you're going to get, it's not really fair, right?
Advanced placement. So this is another national series of exams that we use that are connected to our advanced placement courses. Students who earn a 3, 4, or 5 may earn college credit or may fulfill prerequisite courses at various colleges. Each college approaches the AP scores in different ways. And so anyone out there would need to dig deeper into what colleges will accept. But we use it to identify, to assist students in understanding where they're at with their skills and college readiness. We have, on the next slide, you can see the list of tests that were given. It's important to note that a student may take the test without being in an associated AP course. So for instance, some of these where we have an asterisk, maybe there was only one student who took a test. May not have even been a course on the roster, but a student who has experiences in learning is able to take that test, and we do receive those scores. Couple things to highlight. I would just, we didn't do a slide or a column with the average, the percent of students earning a 3 or better, so I can just highlight a few of them. Biology was at 77% of testing students. Again, not every student who's in a course takes the test. They can choose not to. Both calculuses were AB and BC were over 70%. Both both English courses, the language and composition was 75%. Lit and comp was 96% of testing students earning a 3, 4, or 5. Environmental science over 70, microeconomics over 90, psychology 73, government 81%, U.S. history 70%, world history 84%. So again, within our AP data, we're seeing a lot of students who are earning the 3, 4, or 5, which maybe it saves them money in college on course taking, or at least it allows them to step into a more advanced course, which I think is something that's important to acknowledge for families.
And again, can we break this up? Like, I would just be curious. I wonder how our AP enrollment, speaking to what Director Vodova said, how many free and reduced lunch kids are enrolled in these courses? What's the diversity in the courses?
Yep.
Kind of who are the kids in these AP courses? And then I know we also have, and I'm going to butcher the name, but there's a trend, right, to go to the college in the schools.
Yep.
And is that going to be where we're going to go away from AP in any way and into more of that? Or is that, I don't know, I guess I know we're doing that in some of our courses.
Yeah, so that decision is at the department level, at the course level, really looking to see what course is going to be most advantageous for the students.
Okay.
So for instance, I think last year we had switched from AP Spanish and French to college in the schools. So the difference being, in order to earn that college credit, you have to earn a 3, 4, or 5. With the CIS, you're taking the college course. I believe Spanish, maybe French as well, is out of Bethel University. So you earn that college course in conjunction with passing the class and the tests within. And so it's not based on an external measure. It's based on your work from within throughout the year, not a one test on one day.
Right, and exactly. And I didn't know if that was kind of a trend now to go to that, or if it's...
It goes both ways. The other piece about the college and the schools that we need to be cautious of for our students is they're accepted a lot of places in Minnesota, but they will not accept the credits if you go out east or out west, or so they're kind of regionally accepted.
Okay. Versus the AP.
Right.
Yep. And there is a cost to the district as well for those tests, or for the college and the schools
Okay.
partnership.
Is it similar to PSEO, cost to the district?
It's less.
Yeah,
It's
it's
less.
less, but,
less.
yeah.
It would be interesting, though, to just look at some of our courses and our programming and just kind of the diversity and just the, socioeconomic levels and stuff like that, but.
Yeah, that's something we can certainly take a look at. So the next step, that's our data so far, right? We're still getting more data in. Now, as I said, FastBridge just ended today, so we'll be taking a look and analyzing that. But, school teams, principals, they're building leadership teams or school leadership teams are looking at the data. They're setting their goals, both personal as well as a school system, looking to make those school improvement plans, strategies of action, professional development that's aligned to that. And so this data has a life beyond simply taking a test in the spring and analyzing it here at the board level. So, as I said, in October, we'll bring together a more, we'll add to the second part of the conversation about what are we doing now that we're seeing this data, we're identifying some causes, we're identifying some things that we can do. We'll bring a formal presentation as part of those pieces.
Will the FastBridge data be able to be looked at that
Sure
point too?
can.
Okay.
Yep.
This is excellent. Questions? I know. Yes, Dr. Forbetti?
Thank you. Thanks for a great presentation there. We are excited about the moves, with respect to the gaps, the achievement gaps that we're seeing. We also know that collectively there's been some great improvements. But just looking at some of the records a report that I'm looking at right now, there's still some issues that I think we need to point out here because, with the presentation as a whole, it's fantastic. We're excited about the move, but I think I don't want us to lose sight of some of our kids that obviously are trending downwards. And if you look at the Black and Latina kids, Latinx kids here in MCA science, the trend is down. That's a concern. 2020-2021 was way better than the performance now. And that's also, you can also see that in math. And those are two very important areas. And so I don't want us to lose sight with all the fantastic things that are happening right now. But my concern is that those two groups have always had it for the last so many years. And really I haven't seen anything that has been done to support that group in improving their test scores. So when we talk about the achievement gap, it's exactly what we're talking about. So what are we doing to help support these kids? You see the trend move up with the others, but not necessarily this group. And I'm sure in terms of the population, the number of students in these groups, they're not that many. You can probably count them on, you can count them with respect to the percentage that we have, but yet they are not doing as well. And this is not something that started today or 2 years ago. It's been there for years. So what are we doing to help these kids?
Yeah.
To be in the sciences is no joke, and for these kids to still not be able to perform, and also in math, it's quite concerning for me.
I've got a couple of points in a minute I'll make regarding what you're saying, and
Okay.
let me know if that helps solve or helps answer your question.
Okay, sounds good.
So,
And another thing too is for the free and reduced lunch for a lot of the kids there, it's a good question you had asked. If the support is there for AP classes, because I'm sure a lot of the kids are probably not taking it because they're unable to pay. I don't know if we've looked into that, because these are important opportunities for these kids to gain college credits and not pay for, that part with respect to their tuition. There's also the support for paying the application fees. I don't know if we tell the students or we tell the parents that they can actually get letters from their counselors and use those letters so they don't pay. Just send it to the different universities and they can actually get waivers. I don't know if we inform these kids so they can do that. And I just feel that these are things, information that will be really good for these children to have. so they don't have to worry about, because the more schools you're applying to, the more money you're paying. So if they can have those letters where they can get all of these waivers, I think it's going to help expand their opportunities and their reach in terms of acceptance.
Do we have an angel fund for, I thought I remember something about that for helping those on free and reduced.
I'll have to look into that. I'm not. Yeah,
Yes, Director Vodova.
I also think it's really important for kids on free and reduced lunch, or, I mean, there's other kids too that there's like after-school activities or activities that like they could meet with their teacher or whatever, but they can't get home or they have a job. Or I think we need to think of ways to help them be able to get the academic help they have that maybe some other kids, their parents might not be working 2 jobs, so they might have a parent who can like make sure they pick them up or make sure they get somewhere, and they might not have that access. And so I think we need to really think about that. Like, how do we help those kids gain the access to the, like, we have all these great programs, but if you can't get to them, or you can't get home after them, or you can't pay for them, it doesn't matter to you that there's all these programs. So that's it.
I guess for me too, I know that budget cuts have hit us hard. I mean, I've been, like, when we passed the levy, and I know we didn't pass enough to kind of make up for the cuts that had been made in the last, decade from one operating levy to the next. And I know we were talking about identifying which cuts really hurt the organization the most, and targeting the levy dollars towards support and services that really have hindered us. So I think so just knowing where that's at and where those levy dollars that the community kind of so generously supported, just really having a plan of where those dollars are going to go and what holes are going to be plugged would be helpful for me.
Yep.
Just to be able to identify that.
So I would speak to this slide a little bit, and then I'll turn it over to Dr. Funk. But I think a lot of what we're talking about here are the systems level work that needs to be done. And, having a full teaching and learning department now, which we haven't had for a while, really, for me, in my position, in my chair, is a huge benefit to help a system move forward. So as a teaching and learning group, we're involved in supporting the district in all of these different ways here in the slide right now, really looking at our standards-based instruction and aligning our curricular materials with our instruction and our assessment to make sure that what's happening in the classroom is aligned with where our students need to be. It's growing that professional learning community, creating the collaborative action teams to organize around student data, to know what to do with that data, how to respond. And so, we're participating in the solution tree, who are the kind of the PLC gurus, as a whole system. We are, as I mentioned earlier, we're really working as TNL with our multi-tiered system of supports and the interventions, and really helping the interventionists and the classroom teachers understand, here's this data, what do we do with it, how do we understand it, what interventions are going to work best, and also utilizing some of the various tools that we're trying to build within, so that teachers have a closer access to the data to can parse that out and really see where their kids are growing. So that's one answer, that's one part of that, of how we use our dollars to support systems level work, which will have an impact on individual students as well.
I love this presentation. I know it's you and a lot of other people behind the scenes probably that are doing this, sitting there and at this table. So thank you, because this is really good information, and it's exciting to have to see where it goes moving forward and how it gets distributed to staff, principals and staff and families. And I know as a board, I always like to leave things, and maybe there isn't an answer right now, but it's like, how as a board can we help our kids?
Let me talk to that.
Yeah, that would be great.
So I've been doing a lot of reflecting. I've led a lot of organizations in the world, military, school-wise, and this slide kind of encapsulates it. And so I think Caleb said it really well. We have a roller coaster. And in my experience, whether it's educating students, working with teachers, training soldiers, there's three things that we take a look at when we're working with people to improve the system. The first thing we look at is what we're teaching. It's the curriculum and how it aligns to whatever the goal is, the standard or the local standard, whatever that may be. The second thing we look at are the people. Do we have enough people meeting the needs of our students in the classroom, outside the classroom, interventionists, counselors? What supports do we have? The third thing is, what are we doing with our staff to meet their needs, to ensure that they are meeting the needs of our students? And that's through a mentorship program, implementation of curriculum, ongoing implementation when people come and go from the district, and then as the state adjusts standards, what are we doing to develop our folks to meet those standards? So these are real inputs that we can input into the system and that you can make decisions on at the board level that will impact the lives of our students and really impact the results we see. Now, I'm going to show you a couple slides here in a minute. And there's been a lot of people in our office doing some hard work historically here. These slides are not going to be, they're not good news slides, but they're historical slides based upon where we are at as a district. And I think they can help start to answer some of the questions that we're hearing tonight. So don't shoot the messenger. All right. So one of the things, as I said before, is we look at curriculum. So I talked with Caleb, I talked with Carissa, I talked to a number of folks, I met with all the principals, and we took a look at our curriculum. And we took a look at when's the last time we did either a K-5 or a K-12 curricular adoption. So the first subject line there is ELA, English Language Arts. We adopted K-5 in 2018-19. You can see the state revised the standards in 2010. They did it in 2019. They're going to be, the test will be, the change test will occur within 25-26. When I hear questions on math, and while we are struggling in some areas in math, we last adopted math in this district in 2012. But you can see we're okay from a state angle of assessments because they haven't changed the state MCA test since 2010-11. However, when the last time we adopted math and really got our teachers focused on the curriculum has been a number of years ago. And so we are inconsistent in our approach to math in this district. You can look at the arts. Last curriculum adoption was 2010-11. You can see how the standards have changed since then. Fayed, 10-11. We did get a PEP grant, I believe, in 13, which provided us a lot of equipment. But you can see how the standards have changed. Health is local, 10 and 11. Science and social studies is actually before 2005, 2006. We found a document that said the board is suspending the curriculum adoption in 2005, 2006. We have seen no further adoption since then. So when I hear questions about science and our science scores are going down, or I see questions about our math and our math scores, all right, we have not adjusted our curriculum since 05, 06. And I'm a social studies teacher in those areas. Now, having said that, we may have adjusted pieces of the curriculum. You may see, I think it was the Northern Lights, or I can't remember the curriculum for 6th grade history. but from either a K-5, a 612, or a K-12 angle. That's the curriculum adoption plan we have had as a district back to the early 2000s. Go ahead to the next slide. District staffing. Going back to 05-06, we decided to increase class sizes by 0.6, by 0.86, by 1.36. 2007-08, we cuts to district administration, district-wide support in that area. 2007, we increased class sizes some more. 2012-13, we went two different ways. We increased the 4 through 6, and we decreased the secondary. 2012-13, we cut admin support staff. 2014-15, we reduced instructional staff. 15-16, we reorganized the central office and cut $400,000. And then 18-19, we cut another $450,000. Next slide. Professional development, had a meeting on Tuesday. I had another meeting with some principals this morning. They said our approach has really been hodgepodge. If we're doing a implementation like we did with reading and English language in 2018 and 19 and with the phonics, they said that was great. We were focused, we were doing it. But since we haven't had a curriculum cycle that we have been following, it has not been real focused and real aligned. As a result, it's been inconsistent district-wide. And I think you can see there, 2009-10, they reduced the staff development budget. And then in 19-20, those cuts were made to it as well. So when I go back to taking a look at curriculum, I go back to look at staffing levels and what are we doing for the professional development for our staff. We certainly have some areas of opportunity there. And the reason I'm kind of bringing it in these three buckets for you tonight is as we move forward here, Caleb is going to come in a few weeks and he's going to bring forward, here's our, 8 or 10 year curricular cycle?
10, yeah.
Okay, so he's going to show you a 10-year curricular cycle that we want to fund moving forward, so we're not in this situation. And we are going to have at some point staff development discussions on what we're doing there and other pieces. So I think overall over the past 15, 20 years, even though we made a lot of budget cuts, we kind of said we're trying to firewall the kids and the teachers. And we've done, I think, an effective job of that. However, I think there are costs associated with that, and be it curricular or from a professional development perspective. So when people ask, okay, you're doing this, my response to that is, all right, how are we changing the input systemically to improve our craft and to really meet the needs of our students? So that's my thoughts on that.
Thank you, Director Riley.
I appreciate that. When I came onto the board in 19, I walked in having to cut $2.1 million. That was in alignment with the settling of contracts. When we were approaching the levy conversations, I thought it would have been paramount to have the CDT conversations with the building that was on the topic of discussion, along with operational costs that were going to be needed at the same time, though that just kind of disintegrated. I think in the planning part of everything, and you're experienced in this, and I'm sure you get that, we have to make sure that when we're settling contracts and when we're moving forward with programming, we can afford it all. And some of our contracts have been expensive, and we are at the top of pay in contracts. And I think we have great teachers and we have great staff, but in order to have support on the lower levels of things, we have to moderate that a little bit. And so I appreciate what you have to say.
Director Petrie.
This is all very interesting. I've been around this district for 20 years or more, and I know that when, there was like 5 years during the mid-2000s, early and mid-2000s, that the district cut the budget every single year for 5 years in a row. And a couple of those years were $1 million cuts. And, it was in 2007 that we renewed an operating levy to help stem that. But I think that the other thing that we need to talk about, just in terms of this roller coaster, is that since 2012, we have had 7 superintendents.
Yeah.
Now, 2 of those were essentially the same person who served as an interim, not contiguously, but, served as an interim for a year. But when you don't have top leadership, and you don't have someone who can come in and work for some number of years to make changes, you're just gonna keep roiling the system. You're just never really gonna be able to get traction. And some of these superintendents, barely got their feet under them, and then there was another change. And it is really hard to expect. It goes back to what W. Edwards Deming said, right? You have to have good systems in place to be able to get the results that you want. And we have not, for more than 10 years, had consistent leadership in place. And then you talk about one of our most recent superintendents, who, when she was forced out, most of the top leadership at Central Services went as well. All of those changes filter down into what happens in terms of achievement in our schools. And so I, for one, am delighted to see that you are digging into the data and that you are bringing a systems approach to making improvements, because that is what we have been sorely needing in this school district for more than a decade.
I agree. Director Hoggart?
Along the same lines as Director Petrie, in the creating of a new system, this whole presentation has been just giving me lots of food for thought as we go into our strategic planning discussions. And it's making me really excited to, first of all, see where we've been in a very honest way, and that roller coaster for sure that we're all witnessing. And to have the opportunity to really dig into this and figure out what direction we want to go with this district. If we want to continue on that roller coaster, or if we really want to try some new things and maybe, hopefully, put us on a new trajectory of better achievement, better engagement, and a better education for all of our kids. Every single one of our kids. So this presentation leaves me actually pretty hopeful and energized that we are going to be heading in a really good direction with new leadership and hopefully new systems in place to really help us, and new funding with our tech levy in place as well. I feel like that has really given us a bit of a boost coming into a new systems approach. So thank you for all your hard work. This has been really great.
Dr. Riley?
There's a lot of chatter that goes on about having the instability of a consistent superintendent over a numerous amount of years. We've seen a decline in academics in 15 while that superintendent was still here. The decline was happening. There was a 30% increase in cost to administration in 15 when that superintendent was here as well. And our issues go even farther beyond that. And we were all well aware of that. And so, things happen with us within this community, and it was devastating, and it's been devastating for this community. I'm glad we're here talking about the future. I'm glad we're here moving forward in what we're presenting tonight and putting a plan in action to better our kids in our town.
Director Kelsenberg?
What's the complexity to adopt a new curriculum in any of these areas? A lot of people involved in that. Does it start with you and just get handed over? What's the complexity, I guess?
Do we have another 2 hours? I think
If there's a quick answer.
Yeah, I think it's about, part of it is about having a framework to operate from that is connected to a strategic plan and mission to say, this is the direction that we're going. Even just today with our teaching learning group, we were talking about, what's the instructional framework that says this is what good instruction looks like in Stillwater? What's the vision for some of those pieces? And that work stems from the board and the direction that you give. It stems from that strategic plan that says these are the critical elements for the district. And it's on us in teaching and learning to create the relationships, to create the teacher leadership structures so that we are able to explore what are the standards saying that instruction needs to include? What are the best practices that we want to employ? What are the assessments that we're going to use to gauge whether or not students are learning? And finally, what are the materials that we're going to use to make that all happen? So it's very complex, and it's not as easy as saying, well, we'll choose this box of materials, and then everything's going to get better. Right? Because it's often not about the box of materials, but it's about all of the professional development that goes into it. It's about all of the supports to teachers to ensure that curricular program is being implemented as intended, with the assessment systems, and with that review process. We say 10 years. Partly that's because of state standards get rewritten, revised every 10 years, but it's also a funding piece. That, to do $1 million adoption, you can't do that every 3 years. Mm-hmm. But we can, as part of this 10-year cycle, identify what are those processes within that 10 years to look and see, maybe we need to make an adjustment here. Maybe we need to bring in another little piece to help support some of what we're seeing. And so it's ongoing, and I think that's how I would phrase what kind of complexity it looks like. It doesn't stop. Curriculum improvement, continuous improvement doesn't stop.
Dr. Porbani?
Thank you. So I agree with you. The curriculum definitely, with this presentation made it really clear that we do have some issues there. That also speaks to the skills of our teachers here. Even with the old curriculum, the kids have been able to do quite well with all the exams and testings that have been going on today. And so I do believe that with the updated curriculum that we'll have, will definitely have a lot of impact in terms of new knowledge, new learnings for our children. And my other question will be, just to come back to what we're talking about, with the new curriculum, I know some of our kids are struggling with the old curriculum that we have. With the new curriculum, what are we going to do? Because this is a we thing, it's not a you thing, so it's all of us together. What are we going to do? Because we have to be intentional. Again, I don't want these kids that are struggling to get lost in all of this. Part of the systemic change that you talked about, I'm sure you'll probably dig deep into breaking that down as to the support that will be needed to bring these kids up. So I'm not going to ask any expanded question there. But I just want to, because I know a lot of people are listening. We've had this achievement gaps almost forever in this district, and nothing is really. I think when you first started, we talked about the same thing. And when you did your presentation then. And my question is still the same. But I'm glad that you, some of the pointers here really speaks to those challenges. But the systemic change is also, if you can, maybe Dr. Funk, I know we don't have answers here, because when we speak about systemic change, it's a very broad term. But we have to be intentional about these children.
I think on the I'll speak to the curriculum side of it and the professional development. Okay. If we're using curriculum to teach science from 15, 20 years ago. Science might have been taught a certain way 15 or 20 years ago, and there was a lot we did not understand about the child and how children learn and how they learn differently. And so if we are still using this old curriculum, we have not updated how we're best meeting the needs of the students with the newer curriculum that's out, how we are best professionally developing our staff using the new tools available. I think some of this, and I think that's not the complete answer, but I do think that we have learned a lot about how people learn in the past 20 years or so, but we're still using curriculum that maybe we used when Caleb was in high school. And so I think just with the updating, I think with the focus, I think with understanding, different people learn different ways, and part of that is there's a cultural competence component of that as well. That has to be, it's interesting. I think one of the things we talked about is we did this presentation, but one of the things, I don't know if it was with you, Caleb, or somebody else in the office, and we went through a lot of the data here, and we're talking about kind of the way forward. And I said, well, where's diversity in this discussion? The DEI part of the discussion, and so I think you're going to hear a piece of that when we come back in October and talk through it. But our learners have so many different needs, and what we can do as a school system to prepare our staff to meet those needs is what will help us move forward.
Sorry, just one thing. One thing I'd like for the district to pay attention to is when it comes to learning and students of color, I have had the experience where the trajectory of a student's life depends on where or how the student is viewed with respect to abilities, capabilities, or inabilities. And one thing I would like for us to pay attention to is I've noticed that for most of the families that I speak to, most of the children, students of color specifically, are put in classes, I'm talking about elementary school now, that they shouldn't be in. And there's a lot of students here that shouldn't be in ESL. And I think I've said this before. But the notion that because they're immigrants or because they have different names, they're automatically put in those classes. That's a concern for me because that changes the trajectory of that child's future in the system. I understand ESL and the benefit that it does have for students who don't speak English. But there are students who don't even speak any other language. But English is the only language. Yet, pulled into ESL, I still don't understand why. I speak to this because I sit here today and I experienced it with my daughter when she was in kindergarten. I talk about this because it was, for me, it would have changed the trajectory of her future. And I noticed that a lot of students that shouldn't be, and I know parents that also went through that same thing. My question is, why do we do that? Why do we pick on kids that shouldn't be in spaces and try to force them into those spaces because of what we benefit from it? I'm here now, I sit on the board. I see a lot of things that happen within our district. We have great opportunities. I just want us to be conscious in terms of how we treat our children. Because it's obvious that some of these kids are treated differently. And sometimes the academic opportunities, attention is not paid to them. And for me, that's a concern. If I didn't experience it, I won't be talking about it today. But I did. It happened to me. It's happened to a few other people. And I looked at my daughter and I went, what other language do you speak? And the teacher couldn't tell me. So my question is, why is she here? You know what they said to me? Because her parents are immigrants. That's wrong. You don't do that. If I didn't know what I wanted for my child, she would have been in that class. She didn't need it. The other kids that might need it, she didn't need that. And why force her into that space? So these are some of the things that parents who have children in the school system have to face. And sometimes the kids are put in other types, even sometimes because of lack of understanding of the child due to cultural issues, these kids are also thrown into a couple of other places they shouldn't be in. I just want us to pay attention to those. And because it does affect these kids. It truly does affect them. So please, we have come a long way in this district. I say this openly today because there's so many families who have been affected and impacted by this. And if you talk about the achievement gap, these are some of the reasons why these kids are, behind. So I just say this because I know we've been doing a lot of work to move forward. And I think as an immigrant woman myself, and having all of these opportunities here, I think I can speak to why this is happening because I hear from all of these parents. And not only that, I have same experience. So again, I'm appealing to all of you to be intentional about some of the things that happen to these children, because to me, it's not just the curriculum. It's the act itself. Thank you.
I know we probably do need to look at the time here, and it's a lot of exciting information that you've put before us, and it kind of gets us all brainstorming and thinking, so I think we're all, excited to hear what you come back with in October. And I can only speak, I would concur with the comments both by Director Petrie, with everyone here. Everyone has really good ideas. I'm getting excited about the strategic planning process, and I'm getting excited to just kind of have a full staff and have some continuity and some stability. And then it's just getting the community and our staff to believe in the stability that we're building here. Because they have been through the ringer. They've been on that roller coaster themselves. And so to have this kind of level off and kind of build towards a better place. And I think even our community members, they want to know what we need to do as a community to come together and kind of right this ship. So thank you. This is like so much information that we've been asking for a long time. So thank you. Moving on to policy. Just a couple quick policies. Item B, first reading, policy 806, crisis management.
Marco's going to join me. All right. Good morning, board, or good afternoon.
Yeah, good morning.
What time is it? Board Chair Allison Sherman, Board Directors, Superintendent Law, or Superintendent.
Superintendent Law?
I'm going back in time here. It's been that long. Okay, sorry. Peanut gallery is done. We're talking crisis management. This is policy 806. This is a first reading. The purpose of this policy is to act as a guide for our schools, for building administrators, for all of our employees, really, and our students in our community, to understand what we do as a district in response to potential emergency situations. And we have a current crisis management policy that's very narrow, very slim, and essentially it's there in red print with the strike through. But what it essentially says is that the superintendent would direct and develop and implement procedures for responding to emergencies. And we believe it's important for us to have better understanding of what it is that we are going to do to respond to crisis situations. And so we've expanded upon that, and we have some proposed language for you. Most specifically, we want to call out that as a district, we've also had some concerted efforts around having similar language in how we respond to emergency situations in our buildings. All of our staff have been trained on our standard response protocol. We have it laid out in easy-to-use language that now is throughout our buildings, our community, our parents can also understand what the words mean and what we would respond, how we would respond to specific situations. And so when we look at what is that standard response protocol, you'll see that on page 2 of the proposed language in the policy. And this information is what we would do district-wide in case of a crisis. In all of our buildings also continue to have safety committees. They have building-wide emergency management plans. And this is the shell, the template, the greater understanding of how we do that universally across our district in responding to emergency situations. And so this is a first reading of our crisis management revised policy proposal. Again, we would appreciate your insight, your input, your feedback, and would be open to any updates or anything that you see there that you'd like us to address.
Dr. Huckert? One quick thing to add on. One thing that we did discuss in policy committee, and the board, other board members may notice that there's a lot of procedural language in here. It goes into a bit more detail than what we've been doing kind of more systematically in our policies. And we did discuss kind of, is it necessary to go this in depth in the language in this policy? And we ultimately felt that it was necessary for this particular policy because we wanted to, again, set that language for staff, for our community, for our students, for our parents, so that everybody kind of has the same expectations. And when it really comes to safety in our schools, this is something that people are very concerned about and really want to know what system is in place so that we know what to follow. So we felt that it was necessary at this time to put all of this information in detail into this policy and kind of set it as a system for the district in order to create that awareness and communication. So,
Dr. Riley?
I agree. I like that it's there. Being that it's now inconsistent with the rest of what you've been doing, are you going to also link this into the procedures or the booklet that is being made for the procedures for the community to see as well? So it's there also.
Potentially. So are you asking it to have it in a separate place or to have a link to it in procedures?
So you, on some of these other policies, we're having another area that was going to be linked. I believe this should also be linked to that same place.
Okay.
Just so it's consistent on procedures, even though it's here. So it's there also.
Got it. Okay. So what I'm also trying to process, this is a different, so I think you're talking about the 200 level series where we've been linking the procedures in at the bottom of a policy, correct? Is that kind of what you're thinking of? That's at least what we've been talking about most recently. And this is an 800 level. So there isn't a total separate place that we're housing our procedures. It's linked in with the policies themselves.
Okay.
So in this case, the procedures are in the actual policy.
Okay, so you don't have, there won't be a separate booklet, everything will just be directly linked in. What if it's hard copy though? Like if there's anything that's printed out, so then they'll have to go print out the link as well?
Yes. Do we keep a hard copy?
I just kind of feel like it would be so much easier to have a booklet or a separate.
We could do something like that.
It would
I mean,
make
you
more
could have,
sense.
I mean, there's policy manuals.
Yeah.
You could have a procedure manual as
It
well.
just would make sense.
And then if there are procedures that stem from this or are related to it, those can be linked
Yes.
at the bottom.
Yep.
Right.
Yep.
So I'm sure there will be probably some procedures eventually for safety of the school buildings and
So,
stuff.
just in thinking in our conversation, we also are having, and please jump in, Dr. Jerry, with, are these procedures going to change at all based on buildings? Are they going to get more explicit in procedural language per building? And then are we looking at, do we need to link every building procedure? Like, I think we might need to take that feedback back and kind of talk through it and figure out the logistics of it before we commit to any additional links.
Because my
I just
one-
want to add
oh,
to the additional procedural aspects that are specific to buildings are not always public information,
Correct.
right? So no, those would not be available on
Yep.
our website
Yep.
or part of this policy.
Security risk.
Correct.
So if we were to change the way that we handle safety in our schools, if we were to, I don't know, I'm just
Well-
foreseeing things, yeah. Would this then, because all of this language then, because it's procedural, it would have to be an immediate update, correct? If we,
Not,
Yes.
not necessarily, right?
Okay.
And so we've had some conversation around active shooter drills and what do we do in those scenarios. As you'll see in what we have here in our procedures, we have some broader parameters around when we evacuate. What are some of the scenarios? We also have some parameters of what is a lockdown. And within lockdown, there is some language that already exists there of how it could potentially move into an emergency evacuation, right? And so when we talk about Alice specifically, that's about how do you handle an active shooter in those situations. And I think what we have here is written in such a fashion that it provides the language for the people in the building to know what to do, but it does not preclude using other types of training and resources, such as Alice, if that was something that we wanted to pursue.
my only other question was, and I don't know that it would be relevant, but I know you're mentioning, Dr. Funk had mentioned meeting on school safety with some community groups. Would it be wise to have them maybe take a look at this, just to get some broader feedback on policy, either students or community members who are really vested in school safety?
Can I just make a couple of comments too in what we've done in development of this policy? And so you'll notice that it's right in policy that we engage in ongoing conversations with the emergency management, right? So we continually have those ongoing communications with first responders and other law enforcement, other types of community organizations. We have recently brought on an individual on our staff that serves as an emergency response coordinator for a portion of his FTE that had insight and review of this before it was proposed and moved forward to this level. And so we've continued to do that, and we continue to update our processes and procedures based on that.
And I suppose that's why we have 3 readings. So
Yeah.
if there's community members interested.
We always invite
Or
more
students interested,
input,
this is
but
the
I
time
just-
to provide feedback, so, great. I don't see any other questions, so we'll just kind of read this, and again, feedback from the community, from students, anyone, staff, anyone engaged in our schools, this is the time to kind of provide that feedback, both to Dr. Cherry and Director Hockert. All right. For one more policy, we're doing a second reading on the advertising policy.
Chair Sherman, Board Directors, Superintendent Funk. Let's give it a second reading here on our advertising policy 905. This is a second reading, just as you'll recall, though, this is a new policy being proposed for our school district, and the purpose here is to provide guidelines for advertising and promoting of products and services to our students and our parents and our community. We do have guidelines that are built in here for various levels of advertising, and when I say levels, I mean where that advertising might occur. You might be familiar with a school program where there might be an organization that wants to advertise in that school publication, and so that would be a program, something like that on a school level, a programmatic level, and those types of advertisements would be vetted through the building administrator, the program administrator, and then we also have types of advertisements that occur on our facilities or within our facilities, and that's a different level of process in how we would work through that. And that would always have the superintendent that would need the approval there for those types of advertisements. The other thing that I want to call out is that any type of donations that would carry with it a desire for carrying those advertisements would come to the board for your approval. We have made a small revision to what you saw in the first reading under the accounting section. And Joan, my copy.
Could you move it down so we can read it?
Oh, nope, it's right there. It's just not called out in blue. Sorry. Under the accounting section, it's on the board. It's blue. I think I maybe have a black and white copy. But the advertising revenues, we had some questions about how does that get accounted for exactly. And so we wanted to clarify there that the revenues would be allocated to the general fund. And then those funds would be used to offset our cost of our extracurricular activities. And just a note for the board, I think you may know this already, but our extracurricular activities, some of the funding for those extracurricular activities come out of fees, and we generate revenue for that, but it's not completely paid by the fees of the participants. Our general fund offsets the costs of those fees to offer those extracurricular opportunities. They're expensive. So this is an opportunity for us to also see some additional revenues to help offset those costs.
Does that include extracurriculars, like even fees for, is the PAC considered an extracurricular
Community
membership?
ed.
Okay, that's totally community ed. Okay, so you can't apply that to,
Right.
okay. So would that be, but that would be not just sports-related activities? It could be
Correct.
dance, debate, whatever is out, theater. Okay.
Dance is a sport.
Other than just, the traditional sports. Debate's a sport.
And so with that, this is a second reading. We would appreciate any input that you might have. We would consider that before we would bring it back for a final reading.
All right. If you have questions or comments before the final reading and approval, you know the two people to start with. And if there are no other questions, seeing none, we're adjourned.